Hey guys, I'm just getting back at it again. So you saw my earlier video, hopefully, where we went through and built the CTX modules for my Colour Duo that I'm putting together. So I've got two of those bad boys put together. I've got this Louder Than Liftoff Royal Blue, which originally I thought I would be putting together, but in fact, it's already pre-assembled. So that's a nice thing. And then I've got another module another pair of modules I'll be using that I have from another color project. So anyways, just starting unboxing everything, trying to lay everything out. I can't tell if this is a 6 or a 9, but I think we'll figure it out eventually. But yeah, so I'm not going to go in as much depth into the process here. If there's something that I think is particularly difficult or maybe needs more explanation, I'll definitely get into that. But as it stands right now, I'm just going to try to time lapse as much of this as possible, and if I come up against anything that seems kind of crazy, I will. Okay, I said if there was anything difficult, I was going to stop and make a video, and I would just like to point out this right here. I know I'm smarter than this, but I thought it'd be fun just to at least watch me struggle a little bit. Oh, I found it. Bingo. It's a secret slot. Be cool. Voila. Alright, so I did want to quickly talk about this next part, because if you've never soldered anything like this small and this close together, this may look intimidating. And if you haven't done that before and it doesn't look intimidating, it might be something you want to pay a little special attention to. And what I mean by that is it is really close together, and to me it's just an exercise in patience and paying attention, because you've got two problems here I think you need to pay attention to. One, these are very small pads, and I mean, they're not necessarily small, but they're very close together. So one thing, you want to make sure, even though you're trying not to make, touch any of the other ones while you're going, you want to make sure you're applying enough heat and getting enough solder on there so that they actually do, the solder flows well and make a good solder joint. The second thing, obviously, is you want to make sure you're not bridging these connections, because what obviously can happen is you don't want to have an unplanned short. So it's the same as soldering anything else, right? You need to just use enough solder, not so much that it's flooding over into the other pad. If you're just heating this one pin and this one pad, the solder wants to stay there. So that's the good confidence boost there. It wants to stay where you're putting the heat. But if you're not paying attention and you're heating two pads at the same time, it's gonna probably want to flood over there as well, and you might end up bridging these connections. So just pay attention when you're doing this. And maybe one last word of warning, and I don't think it will be a big problem with this back row here, but this front row, this is a plastic header and a metal pin, and it's just something you want to take care of pretty much every component on this board. You just want to pay a little bit of attention. If you are putting too much heat onto a particular pad, what is potentially going to happen, and especially if you're making mistakes and you're soldering, unsoldering, you're going to heat up this pin a lot, and it's probably, again, more prone to happen on the ones closer to the front because they're actually just shorter distance to the connector here. What can happen is you can start heating up that plastic, and that plastic can start melting, and the pin might start going in and out that way, might pull back away from the front here, and it's just not a fun thing to troubleshoot if that ever does happen to you. And I say this because I've done almost exactly that. So that's just something to pay attention to, and back to the time lapse. So one thing I will say about this relay here, again, just a few tips. It is again, a big plastic box. So kind of like these connectors, we want to be mindful of how much heat we're applying here. These are designed to be soldered in place. So again, they're not components that are just going to be totally fragile, but we should be a little mindful that. The other thing I like to do when mounting these kind of larger components, in especially relays, right? Because this is an electromechanical component. These are things that are prone to wear out and, more prone to, physical damage, in the sense that this get bumped around. It's more likely that this thing will actually, get damaged. Whereas a resistor, you might bust a solder joint, but you're probably not going to mechanically prevent a resistor from working because you shook it up or something like that. So certain things can lead to these resistors failing early. And so one of the things I like to try to do is make sure that this resistor has really good mechanical contact with the board. And so this does a couple things. One, it looks neat. That's not the priority there, but two, having more points of contact with the PCB is kind of only going to help this thing be more stable. What tends to happen when you flip anything that you have to flip the board over to solder, right? It's going to want to sink down. What they recommended in the guide was bending the pins over. What I just like to do, and it's a tall component compared to the rest of the things on the board right now. So what I just like to do is put it in place, kind of put some pressure so that it's seating down, and I like to kind of tack in one of the solder joints, and then I'll kind of go catty corner and do another. And when I'm doing that second one, I'm kind of trying to put pressure on to make sure that this is totally seated. 9 times out of 10, what happens is I'll get this, that second side really, really good and close to the board. And then what I'll do is I'll come in with the soldering iron, that very first pin, and I'll heat up the joint a little bit, and I'll just push on that component. And almost every time that component wants to kind of cinch back up to the board because it drooped down a little bit. You want to be careful here. The idea is not to push it in so much that you're deforming the board, or if you're got a different kind of component, deforming the component and soldering it against its will. The idea is just to make good, solid mechanical contact between the board and the component. And so you just need enough pressure to get it to like sit in place, solder it in. And again, we don't want it where it's so taut that it's forcing the board into a bend or something like that. We're just trying to make those two things mate well, and then you just solder the rest in place. But it's a very simple thing, and it's something I've always tried to do. And again, I just feel like it gives it a little bit, it looks neat, but also I think it gives it a little bit more protection in the case of it getting bumped or dinged or dropped or something like that. Yeah, just something to consider. And also, relay issues are really frustrating to troubleshoot. Well, not troubleshoot, because it'll be pretty obvious. They can be noisy when they're not working, but if this wasn't quite making good contact, you might have a situation where relays are flickering really quickly, and that will really wear them out. So just getting good contact is important. I will say this is another component, the jacks and the XLR, and power connectors, all that stuff. That needs to be. That's another component where figure out a good way to make good contact with the board. Don't put so much pressure on the board that you're flexing the PCB. That could be bad for a number of reasons overall, but big thing is we don't want to force it into tension or anything like that. If you're if you're just looking to tack things on, sometimes what I like to do, and you get creative with your hands, but just load up your soldering iron, just a little bit of solder, and flood the joint a little bit, and you'll just get enough on there to get things flooded and held in place, and then that will allow you to come back in and flood over your other joints pretty quickly. These eat up a lot more solder than the resistors and capacitors and stuff like that, much larger pins and pads. So just be aware of that. You want to see that whole thing flood over well to make sure you're making good thing. And these are the pieces, right, that are going to get the most abuse when it comes to things getting plugged in and unplugged. And I'm sure we've all had an electronic or something like that at one point where a jack's gone bad. So easy to understand why we might want to do a good job here. But yeah, after you get those TRS jacks in, the next thing is we get to do the XLR jack. So I think it will be more of the same.